Morning. We're here again. Well, the overnight ratings are in. It's amazing, is it? A bit of footy, a bit of some camp Europop, and suddenly the RTD gamble looks as though it actually paid off last night because the sandwich effect has worked. And by the way, stick with us. I've got the 5-minute breakdowns. Thanks to Gary Lee. Check out his Facebook page. I've got them and I've tarted them all up. So yes, we've got the 5-minute breakdown so we can really scrutinize what's happened. So RTD might have just been very lucky. Sometimes you gamble, sometimes it pays off. And of course, he knew that if FA Cup final went to extra time, Doctor Who would be booted off BBC One. But it didn't happen. And I think he has benefited from the sandwich effect. So yes, there's the overnights, 2.57 million. Will the devil be in the detail? When I made that thumbnail, I hadn't got the 5-minute breakdowns. Now I do. So like I said, I will show you them. But when I do that, I've got my compatriot here from Sci-Fi Chronicles. So let's get John on.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So far, so good. Well, there's the overnight figures. Did you guess that would go up?
I suspected they would go up. I didn't think they'd go up by so much. But again, this is credit to the strategists that are involved with this production that went for this. Like you were just saying, if it pays off and there's no extra time in an FA Cup final, it's effectively classed as the Goldilocks zone, isn't it? For viewing figures, because you're sandwiched between the FA Cup and you're sandwiched between Eurovision. So that's paid off. We'll just have to see what happens next week.
Yes, is this just a one swallow doesn't make a summer type thing? So I'm just going to say it for another minute or two. I've got the 5-minute breakdowns, and I think we'll spend a fair bit of time looking at that because John hasn't seen them. I've just seen them. And obviously, I assume most of you in the thread haven't. I'll say it one more time. Gary Lee, check him out on Facebook. He has done all the hard work this morning. So thank you to Gary Lee for getting these ready. That's fast going, that. It's a great little community we have, so please check out his Facebook page. As you know, he used to do DWB, Doctor Who Bulletin. Yeah. So there we go. So yes, there's the official 2.57. In other words, it's the best episode on paper of this season. But obviously, you had two massive events either side, which the other shows didn't have.
And no Britain's Got Talent either.
Well, we will come to that, actually, John. I think we might have to. But on the audience share, just to give you an idea here. So basically, we had 3.42 million, it looked like, finishing off with the FA Cup final. I mean, there was a last-minute drama, wasn't it? I mean, it was there a disallowed goal or something? It was all very tight.
Yeah. It looks, well, again, you're right. I mean, look at those figures. I mean, the cynical person in me could say it's all those drunk people from the FA Cup. They can't even find the remote now because they're so hammered. They're just lying down on the sofa eating lots of pizza.
Yeah, I mean, the bold facts are Doctor Who's had a good night for once, compared relatively. But then if we were also truthful, those people who might be in drunken stupors, as John says, we go from 3.42 million to 2.57 million very quickly. So just short of 1 million down that go, do you know what? I might be out of my head. The pizza might be on my ear, but I am not going to put up with that. So 1 million tune out, actively press a button rather than nod off. So yeah, it has bumped 1 million. It is the highest rated show for this series so far for overnights. But so many people clearly hate Doctor Who.
Well, exactly. I mean, especially if you're a Palace fan, by the fact that, all of those Palace fans, they've probably gone straight away to just replay it. So yes. To savor their moment of glory.
So we've got some nice people joining us. A misunderstood class of aliens, often mistaken in their perception by others. Whatever could the Tranoid have meant by this? I mean, as you know, there are so many bits in the episode in itself. Most of my panel last night, who were parents, said they wouldn't let their kids watch what they saw last night. So it's interesting. And that's what people have to do. They have to tune out and think, well, I'd rather watch paint dry. And then not just sandwiched between the Cup and Eurovision, but with an episode about Eurovision, probably got a few extra Euro fans. Because apparently, John, some people do Eurovision parties. So maybe they thought, oh, Doctor Who as well. Whoa.
Apparently so, yeah. You know, wee, come on, let's have a double bill. Come on.
Yes. Well, I've been teasing people for 5 minutes about the 5-minute breakdowns from Gary Lee. Shall I show you them?
Yeah, let's do it.
So here we go. Right. So you saw the 3.42 million that finished. It says there for the Eurovision. I got my figures wrong in a minute. So where it says Eurovision 3.42, that should be FA Cup final at the top. I'll change that for tonight. But so 3.42 million, it's the baton relay. They pass 3.42 million to Doctor Who. Doctor Who immediately drops 900,000 behind the sofa. If only anything was behind the sofa nowadays. And as you can see there, I'll go big screen, 2.69 starts to, we lose a 370,000 in 15 minutes. And that's the bottom line. And it dwells there for quite a while. And then it only starts to pick up again around 7:45 to 7:50, which means they're not watching Doctor Who, let's be honest. They're waiting for the show to start. I've got the figures for the Eurovision, so please ignore that figure at the bottom. It's more dramatic than that. So there you go, John.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's what I've said to you before, really. I'm firmly in the camp that, you know, this is a boost because of two important shows that are on the same day, which is the FA Cup final and also the Eurovision. Nothing in the data makes me rethink that thought process. I would also say it also shows what I've said before, really. I think Doctor Who, for the general viewer, has become essentially something that is just on in the background. So, you know, they're cooking the barbie on a hot day, and, you know, they're going to go outside and have barbecue in a minute, you know, after the FA Cup final. And, you know, it's just there. It's just playing in the background. You know, they're not really, they have a look at it every few minutes or so, you know, as they're walking past, but they're not really paying much attention to it.
And look, you know, one thing, a good for Anthony Parkinson, he's always on this stream first for us. And as he was saying, those who say the overnights are not to be trusted and the overnights we don't need, and you lot, you nasty people, you always pick on the overnights. It's the suddenly they're praising the overnights, going, isn't this amazing? Doctor Who's suddenly got an extra million, and so suddenly the overnights are now the great thing. However, as me and John, and I think all us sensible people are saying, I've just coloured in the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of Doctor Who, and they happen to be the highest figures for the whole show. So I never count them. It's a bit like when you do the ice skating judging and the diving judging. You take the highest off and the lowest off, so to speak. So I take the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes off because they are nothing to do with your program. And I take the average in the middle, and you can see the average. Doctor Who's average was 2.39. Still higher for, you know, all our episodes so far, but we start to see there's an issue. The audience share, everybody keep an eye on, because I'll show you the audience share that Doctor Who normally gets when, as John said, Britain's Got Talent is back. So here you're averaging, to be honest, around 24% audience share. But yes, if you take those two figures out, now 15 minutes in, John, I've got these figures broken down quite handily. So basically, how come we lost even more viewers? And so basically, as you can see, 15 minutes into the program, we'd already lost another 370,000. Now, 15 minutes into the program, if I can show you this, was when we'd actually had a monster with the horns, you know, Freddie Fox kid, saying that, well, you've called me a monster, and if you keep doing those racial tropes, I will just do what you say. So basically, if you call me the devil, I'll act like the devil. So there was an element of racial stereotyping, and, you know, you get what you deserve. But there was an awful lot of action at the beginning. You know, he tried to say it was Die Hard meets Eurovision. By but it,
Yippee-ki-yay.
but it was by 15 minutes that the doctor had unfrozen, seen Susan. Remember, casual viewers might be going, I don't know who she is. Why is he seeing an old woman while he's frozen? Then he gets a confetti gun. Bit four to doomsday, I've got to be honest, with the cricket ball. And he does that, and he gets back and goes flying through some exit door where he meets two gay men who happen to be one of the biggest song contest fans ever. But they're going to be crucial. Isn't it amazing? He lands where the two most crucial people to help him do tractor beams later on and triangulation of the computer. They're both experts in it, isn't it? Who'd have
Yeah,
known?
I mean, it sounds identical to Die Hard. It really does.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Is it very
you know,
gay?
yeah, yeah. I mean, sorry. Can you just repeat that there was a what gun in it
A
yesterday?
confetti gun?
A confetti gun. Okay, yeah, definitely sounds like Die Hard. Then
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah. It was only a little bit camper, only a tiny
a
smidgen.
twinge.
Yes. Die Hard. Does Die Hard mention Brighton Pride?
No, well, I'm not sure whether John McClane ever went to Brighton Pride. To be honest with you, we'll have to look into that, mate. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I think it's good to marry up for everybody just to see that when Doctor Who hit its lowest point and stayed there for a while. So for the next 10 minutes, it stayed there at 2.32. That's when it actually got a little bit. The Doctor kind of revived and men hugged. The two gay men hugged. It's legal, but the thing is, the Doctor said no hugging, time and place. Then they found they're in a museum for the song contest. Now you can imagine casual viewers going, "Oh," and you could see Diva International from Israel years ago when she won in Britain, and Graham Norton and stuff. And it was all of a sudden we went from Die Hards to Gone Wrong, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. Graham Norton always seems to pop up and cause trouble for Doctor Who, doesn't he? You know what he did at Rose, where he talked over the episode, and now he's come back when it's at its worst point. You know, he's like an omen of what is to come, a harbinger, if you will.
Oh, not them. I'm getting sick of these harbingers. Julie Coonan, I'm going to be nice now. I didn't mind Gary and his partner. I think he was called Mike. They were gay, but not too much. Bit like me. I didn't feel they embarrassed gay people by being too gay. Hope you understand what I mean. I do, Julie, completely. Although I found their narrative arc so twee. Oh, honestly, John, it was great writing this by Juno Dawson. Do you know what happened? As well as them being useful for the plot resolution and just how happened to be in the right room at the right time, they looked as though they were going to divorce, and then they found something in each other. So, in other words, when the medic revived the Doctor, he said, "I've never seen you like this before," and he fell in love again.
Oh, sorry, but you know, this. If I wasn't on this show and someone was talking to me about it and they said, "Right, guess what show this is," I would be like, "It's got to be Hollyoaks, isn't it?" You know,
That's and it's so easy peasy, or it's like Heartstoppers or something. It's
yeah,
really kind of that kind of basic level of dot to dot narrative.
yeah.
Yes, we have fallen out of love with each other, but now I've seen I've seen you in a new light, punching an EpiPen into a doctor's chest, and now I fancy you again. Meanwhile, later on in the episode, both of them say to the Doctor, "Oh, I would like to be with you," and I'm thinking, well, I think the divorce was a good idea, really.
I mean, can I just ask as well? Do they have any straight white men in this episode that are good?
Yeah, yes.
Do they
Well,
turn up in it?
he didn't confirm himself as straight, but the one with horns on was probably a horny white male.
Right,
Um,
horny
he's
white man.
literally horny. Yes, he was literally horny, and but he seemed to be locking horns with another woman with horns, so I guess he's straight. But he was also a toxic male. So
Oh
you know,
yeah. So no, we're
'cause
following the same trope then, are we?
well, it's your fault because every straight white man is toxic. I mean, you know, John, you're toxic.
I know. Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, from what I've seen of the images, apparently, you know, doing a podcast clearly I'm going to step up and take
Conrad.
over the earth at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear noise. I don't know what it. So yes, just so everybody can who've just joined us, I'll just kind of do a very quick summary. So basically, Doctor Who got its highest ratings for overnight for this season, and just 30,000 short of being neck and neck with Space Babies, which is like this bastion of great ratings, apparently. But obviously, the devil is in the detail, and that 24.3% audience share. Right, let me just show you what normally happens then with Doctor Who. And of course, normally, John, Doctor Who's around 12%.
Yeah.
So basically, it's doubled its audience share. But as you just said, there's a reason. Look what Doctor Who was up against.
Yes. So there you go. I mean, look, you look at evidence in these things and you look at data. And with the evidence that's presented to us, there's a very strong reason why it did so well. The last night is the equivalent for Doctor Who of, and I'm going to do a football analogy here. It's effectively being told at the beginning of the season by the FA that you're 15 points ahead of every other team before you start the season. You know, you've got a massive advantage before you even step out onto that field. And this is exactly what Doctor Who had last night. You know, they were sandwiched in the Goldilocks zone, which paid off because it could have backfired on them if it had been switched to another channel or iPlayer, but it paid off. But you've got the FA Cup, which is massive, and you've got Eurovision, which is massive. So it's sandwiched in there perfectly, and you've got no competition that's going to test you in that slot. I mean, should it not have got more?
But John, this is the thing, and I don't want to play too much on stereotypes because I happen to be a gay bloke who happens to like football. But FA Cup finals on, and as we said, that's the audience you're inheriting. And so 3.42 million, 900,000 people, like I said, disappeared straight away as soon as it said Doctor Who's on. And actually, 10 minutes into the program is when you see this gay couple, and they're all right. Like Julie said, they're all right. It's just that you can smell that there's going to be campness, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. And, you can imagine casual viewers going, I'm going to put them orangutans on, this is no deal for me. I'm onto ITV. And so basically, at the same point that we got the Doctor going, and being revised by two men and all that stuff. And then, of course, it's the camp song contest. You can imagine football fans going, What?
Yeah.
Why am I watching this? It's so different.
Deirdre, get me another Stella and turn the channel over.
Yeah. Remember when Doctor Who was originated by Sidney Newman, they had a problem. You had the same men, mostly men, watching the FA Cup final grandstand type thing.
Yep.
And then you got the teenagers with Jukebox Jury. And as you know, they had a 25-minute slot and they said, how do we bridge the divide between these men, mostly men, watching their sport? And then suddenly you've got the teeny boppers. And then they invented, as we all know, Doctor Who. Now, they've seemed to have forgotten the art of scheduling because FA Cup finals on. Oh, yeah, oh. Testosterone flying and excitement and adrenaline. And then suddenly we're going to show you high camp drama and lots of songs with aliens in rainbow skirts and everything. Where's the bridge?
Yeah. It's not there, is it? And you can see a lot of people are just, the FA Cup fans, as I said to you a few minutes ago, if you're a Palace fan, you're replaying that match. So that's some of the potential audience there. But with the rest of it, again, it's kind of like, well, we've watched the FA Cup now. The kids are going, you know what? I'm going to go and, like probably I did. I'm going to go in the back garden with my mates with the football and play pretend FA Cup. And that's what I think a lot of kids did, and that's more important to them than watching an episode of Doctor Who.
Now, I got these figures again, thanks to Gary Lee on Facebook. Check him out. So, I said that figure at the end was wrong, and obviously he gave me even more. He gave me the start to Eurovision. Ha ha! So here we go. So basically, RTD wasn't bothered about the football fans, the testosterone toxic males, and all the rest of it. He wasn't aiming for the audience. So, John, you don't get it. What he was trying to do is going, Doctor Who's going to be very Eurovision, and I'm going to get all those people watching. And so here's the figures that I have been given by Gary Lee for the beginning of that. So Doctor Who ends with 2.82 million. The Eurovision starts and just short of doubles its audience. And then it adds another 1.5 million. So basically, in 15 minutes after Doctor Who's finished, suddenly people find the remote control. Suddenly.
Yeah.
2.82 million, which we know is not Doctor Who's audience, that's just the legacy. But it jumps by what? 3.6 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you an awful lot, that we lost 1 million as Doctor Who started, and we gain another 3 million when Doctor Who ends. So if RTD wasn't after the football fans, those toxic males and all the rest of it, and he was trying to get all those, camp loving Europhiles, he didn't, did he?
No, he didn't. And again, I think it also speaks to the fact that, on an evening like this, when there was every opportunity to grow the ratings and the viewing figures, which they've done, credit them there, they've done, but it should have been a lot more for what the opportunities they had on the night, essentially. And I think this actually bears out more evidence that the fact Doctor Who is not event television anymore. People are not remotely interested in it because, like you were saying a few minutes ago, the competition you've got there when you put up the TV listings. If Doctor Who was event TV, it would have a lot more viewers, and you're right, they probably would have hung around a higher level for the Eurovision, and it would have carried on to a certain degree. But it hasn't. People are still tuning out when they get an opportunity to. So it's people can praise it, and I'm glad the people that are saying viewing figures don't matter and they're now saying viewing figures do matter. That's fine if you want to praise it, but the data actually, to me, says, well, people are still checking out of it.
Yeah, at both ends. So the
Yeah.
sandwich, as you say, helped. It was a great tactic in one way, but there's tactics and there's strategy. And the overall strategy has really to slay the Doctor Who brand on the altar of other stuff. And so tonight's episode, or sorry, last night's episode, Doctor Who was basically compromised and made Eurovision. And has it worked? And obviously, and I will come to the thread in a minute, don't you worry, everybody. But basically, if that was the great idea, then he didn't quite manage to reach that 6.4 million who were really up for a party to watch Eurovision. No. So, his quality writing, apparently, this new fresh blood from Juno Dawson, the high budget from Disney with the CGI effects, monsters and Europop. Oh, wow. It doesn't work. So Doctor Who has been sacrificed on the altar of something that hasn't paid any dividends. And then you go, so what are we left with? Was it a great episode of Doctor Who? Was it a classic? And again, take the 5 minutes off the end with the Rani, take the Easter eggs of the Susan, and what in essence was the episode, because I'm honest, for 30 minutes, I nearly could just about say I was surviving, and it had more excitement than usual. And then we got the Doctor being undoctorish. Then we got some trans messaging hidden in a metaphor about the horns being docked off and you had to kind of hide yourself. And then, as I said here last night, once you hit 31 minutes, the Doctor said he had ice in his heart. Then we had the tractor beam saving 100,000 people in 1 minute. They edited Making Your Mind Up, John, into 1 minute of music, and in that 1 minute they saved 100,000 people from being frozen, and they were back in the audience by 34 minutes. You can imagine those people who've just watched a long football match and seen the real drama, Shakespearean drama of
Yeah.
watching a football match final and all the crowd and dynamics, suddenly watch easy peasy silly babies Doctor Who.
I mean, again, if you're a viewer now, and what I say this a lot, there's this almost mindset from writers these days, I think, where they actually treat the general viewer as an idiot, and they dumb things down because they think the viewer won't understand what we're trying to tell them if we don't dumb it down. But if you're a general viewer and you're seeing all of that, that is going to put off a lot of people straight away anyway, because they're just going to say, look, they're going to go, oh, this is crap. This is low quality stuff.
Yeah.
Why am I going to watch this? I'll tune into something else, thanks. Or I've got Coronation Street recorded from the other night. I'm going to put that on instead of watching this on my box. That's what happens because the quality is so poor. I mean, you've said to me before, mate, you've said season 2, and we've made this clear. All credit to the people behind the scenes, the production people, the people involved in the effects, and the practical stuff. Top draw people. They've done great work, but they, if anyone, have been let down by poor writing. Because this isn't engaging writing for all the work those people have done.
No. I mean, it had a great look about it. And to be quite honest, I think if you were half dozed, you would have been watching Doctor Who and then the Eurovision and not seen much of a difference. I do. So in that way, the behind the scenes people have really got the vibe right. But it means that there's an extra 40 odd minutes of Euro pop stuff and high campness when the British public, and I would have thought any viewing public, want a rich diet.
Yeah.
And if you're paying your license fee, all you've got on the BBC for hours and hours and hours is high camp Europop and football. And actually, where's the bridge? This was a gift to just get everybody settled down again, get the kids back on. And they've been excited. Like you said, they might want to go in the garden and knock a football around.
Yeah.
But you can say, oh, no, there's that dangerous monster on. And you just settle the family ready for if they're going to watch Euro.
I would actually argue that if Doctor Who wasn't even in that scheduling, if you just had the continuation of Match of the Day and the pundits talking about the result and the highlights up until Eurovision, you probably would have kept a lot more people in viewers than you would from watching this episode of Doctor Who. It's clearly not engaging with people, is it?
It's a fair guess. If it drops down by 900,000, well, I mean, just keep Gary Lineker waffling on. Yeah, we'll show you the goal again, type thing.
Yeah.
So let's bring in the thread because a lot of ideas here. Julie, he wouldn't need to call Drady. She would know what a man needs and turned it ever. I always put a quote up when I'm halfway through a conversation. I love that. Thomas McCarthy. Most gay people aren't interested in Doctor Who. Have you been to a Doctor Who convention? Same for everyone else. Don't confuse gay with woke ideology, isn't it? Sexuality. Well, I agree with that, but yeah.
I mean, this. I'm going to jump. One thing I was saying, I've kept quiet on this for quite a long time. I hate all of this nonsense that's come out the last few years about basically, Doctor Who was always a gay show. No, Doctor Who wasn't.
No.
It was a kids family show that engaged multiple age groups for decades. That's what it was, and it didn't label people, or it didn't say that this is a show for gays or this is a show for gay straight people. It was just basically, this is a show for everybody who wants to escape the realities of the world and go on an adventure with this fantastic character. That's what it was.
And as Garbage, good to see you, Garbage. And I mean, Garbage made this for us. He makes loads of stuff for me, and I'm always appreciative. Here we go. Just in case, this is what you wanted, an injection of this morning, didn't you?
Please don't tell me that the figure in white is the what Shooty was wearing for the entire episode.
No, for once he would have stained himself because he was in space and all the rest of it, and there's drink everywhere and everything. As people said, it wasn't very clever sci-fi because they were all getting frozen in cold space, except the slush puppies flying through the air that hadn't frozen. It was amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's I mean, well, people talking there about Carol Ann Ford coming back. I've said to you, I heard it. I think you mentioned it to me as
yeah,
well, and I thought to myself, well, it's nice to see her back. I just wish it had been in another era, really. For me, I think it would have worked better with Capaldi. I think for me, it always felt it would have kind of worked okay with Capaldi. And I think in this era, with what's going on with this era, I was like, well, I kind of see this era of Doctor Who now in my head. I see it as like, with like I'm a DC Comics fan, but they've got Elseworld stuff, which is like alternative versions of Doctor, of characters. This is an Elseworlds Doctor Who, where it's not the official Doctor Who. It's a spin-off element to it,
yeah.
from a multiverse.
Well, Paul Holgate here, it was so rushed, it was utterly incomprehensible. That I've got the breakdowns, and as I said, you went from basically, let's have a look. The Doctor looking very angry, because RTD wants him to look angry at 31 minutes 22 seconds, and then he was rubbing his chin and how can we sort this out? And then you get the moment again. You're half in the episode, and then suddenly he goes, "You are a medic, and I bet you can re-engineer the cryogenic chamber to revive everybody." And the nurse goes, "Yes, I tell you what, we need them in there." and then his boyfriend happens to be the expert on triangulation, and he learns how to direct light into a tractor beam to collect every one of the 100,000 people. And can we also, just to add to the campness, play Bucks Fizzers Making Your Mind Up, and then everybody revives one by one, 100,000 people. Nobody needs the toilet. Nobody needs recovery. We could, I tell you what, I don't know why the NHS has waiting lists and everything, because the doctor solves it in 50 seconds. And then the crowd are all dancing again, wanting another bop. And the frozen brain of the Ryland from the future suddenly says, "We need the spirit of the song contest." And he points at the woman who's been hiding her identity by taking her horns off. And she sings a song. And you can imagine all the Crystal Palace fans and all the Man City fans going, "This is what I needed."
Again, if we weren't talking about Doctor Who and you were telling me that, I wouldn't have guessed it was a Doctor Who episode. I really wouldn't.
I mean, Eye of Horus, Rachel, yes, she'll be on my show later today, says there was even a she, her pronoun nonsense in the episode. At what time code? It was early on, Eye of Horus. I mean, yeah, there's so much to mention. To me, that was almost kind of so yesterday's news, because they've done it since the Star Beast. She chucked it in. It was the little kind of diminished director, the little, she was a good part, actually. She said very early on, she, her, about one of the contestants. I found it more problematic stuff, like saying the doctor said he went to Brighton Pride last year, and I showed some photographs last night of what Brighton Pride apparently looks like. I wouldn't have kids anywhere near them, but suddenly Doctor Who is telling kids that Brighton Pride's fine. Crazy.
I mean, what you were just saying there as well about about the strokes of luck that they just run into all these people that can just jigger it all up perfectly. It just reminds me of that Red Dwarf episode, where they find the luck virus, and they're walking down the corridor, and it's like, oh, I need this component, and he bangs his leg, and it's the component. It's, oh, what a stroke of luck! It's that was played for jokes, but this is played serious.
I know. Well,
Same thing.
As soon as you say to Juno Dawson, "I want Die Hard meets the Eurovision," I think there's a disconnect regarding two styles and tones straight away. And I don't think I mean, please tell me in the thread, is a diehard audience similar to the Eurovision audience? Can you mash? Is this a mashup?
It did. I mean, you can always almost picture, can't you, Shooty running across a floor filled with broken glass in bare feet, can't you, shooting a machine gun? I mean, that's just, I can see where he was
Mm.
going with this. I mean, it just works, doesn't it?
Well, Thomas McCarthy, not impressed. Doctor Who was supposed to be a sci-fi, not a musical, camp, woke, ideologically driven show. This is what I mean. It's been sacrificed on an altar for something else, and I don't think it has paid off. As we've said about the ratings, they're not as good as they will be saying on other streams today. They are. They're not.
Yeah,
It's been, what's that in F1? You've got the DRS period when basically you can be in the wake of the car in front, and that can speed you up. It pulls you a
yeah,
bit, doesn't it?
it
And
does.
I think we've had the DRS effect on Doctor Who, which is the FA Cup final has dragged the audience to a certain point. We've
Yeah,
done our best to lose speed. And then as the Eurovision motor car races by, we've managed to get just a bit of that draft. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah, and I think that won't be there next week, so that will be quite telling. Uh,
Very.
and on your analogy there, I think this next week will be cars will be coming from the rear and they'll overtake it.
Yes, we'll be in the pits.
Yeah, exactly. Busted tires.
Yes. Paul Holgate says, I actually nodded off when he started torturing the terrorist and woke up with the Rani revealed. I rewound, but I lost interest by that point. I
Torturing.
did manage to stick with it for 30 minutes, but then I have to say the reveal of the Rani and everything just didn't do it for me. Stephen Braddock, none of it made sense. Norton originally said the song contest spread from Earth to the galaxy. A bit later then said Earth was destroyed in May 2025. So how did the song contest get there then? There's an awful lot of bits like that that make no sense.
I've got to be honest, mate. To be honest with you, if that spread out into the galaxy, I would be begging for the Daleks to come and wipe out
Oh,
the civilizations.
by the way, I'll give you two reveals. Never mind the she/her bit, IFRS. This is the big. Alpha Centauri was mentioned. Now that wouldn't surprise you because, as
Yeah,
you know, the lobby has said, "Oh, Alpha Centauri was the first trans or
yeah,
something." Not a hermaphrodite. I can never
yeah,
say it.
exactly.
Hermaphrodite
Yeah,
hexapod. But the other one was they did. If everybody wants to bore themselves and go through the transcript again, when they were announcing some of the acts and people who were in the stadium, the Harmony Centre, the Zygons were mentioned. So the Zygons have a night off for Eurovision.
Well,
You know,
this is what I've said to you before. I'm going back and I'm watching the classics. Right, I've watched the Capaldi run as well recently, and I watch it and I think everything I hear from this series, I cannot even picture that this is at all the same show. That doctor is still the same doctor, but he's changed his appearance. That it's just night and day for me. It really is. I mean,
yeah,
this looks like some sort of teen BBC Three show about some rocker 25th century woman that meets a maid in the Victorian era. From that first image, it's
yeah.
just we've got a
And
podcaster
it,
as a
it,
baddie in the finale.
you've got a podcaster, you've got a Rani who I just think there's problems all over the shop for just the normal punter. The Rani, and I know it's an Indian term, so therefore, in a way, you've gone back to the original etymology of the words to give us an Asian actress as the Rani. Okay, go with that, whatever. But Mrs. Flood, who is the Rani too, is not the Rani. She's a Rani, it said in a transcript.
Mm.
And the Rani referred to her as Mrs. Flood. And she's going, yes, ma'am, and all this. And I'm thinking, oh my God. I just think
Subservient white person,
which looks like the 14th Doctor and the 15th Doctor because the 14th Doctor was
Yep.
broken.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just going to go and say it here. You've got people in this production team who are white people. The fact that they're writing this says quite a lot about their own insecurities, and the fact that they're actually belittling white people. I'm honestly very concerned now about the BBC or whoever's pulling the strings about if this is now policy within the BBC that you've got to effectively diminish the white characters at expense of other characters, because we're seeing it more and more now, and it's, you wouldn't think that, the majority of the UK population is white, would you really? From this, I'm sick and tired of us also being lectured to about how bad we are and how terrible we are. This really does wind me up.
Well, there were so many things in just those last bits, and Julie Coonan seems to agree with me that Anita Dobson, good actress. I don't know Archie Panjabi, and some people have told me she's good as well. Okay, so let's say equal. But the point is, you've made the more original one. I mean, I know Kate O'Mara's the original Rani. You've dismissed her as second class or not as good. And I see that as a real dynamic problem. It's horrible. It's actually demeaning and horrible to watch. I hated the scene with the 14th Doctor being hugged by a brand new 15th Doctor in his undies saying, there, I've
Yeah.
got through rehab. I hated that. If you've ever liked the David Tennant Doctor, that just diminished him, and it was horrible.
And also with, with mental health as well, that's just flicking it away and basically saying, oh, by the way, I fixed my mental health issues with the wave of a magic wand. That was what I laughed at with that, because it's so poorly done. But this comes back to, what we've talked about before, mate, is the fact that I hated it after that 60th, where they went into the fantasy element and the sledgehammer creating a second TARDIS, and they're doing it now. And for me, and again, this is where it's not sci-fi anymore. I want answers explained in the show, in the universe, of why that has happened. Because for me, growing up with Doctor Who, you know, you talk about regenerations and you talk about there has to be a special reason of how and why the doctors meet their previous selves. You have the three doctors where the Time Lords are involved and they're saying, you've broken our most sacred rule, and they're having that argument in the Time Lords are. You've then got that again in the Five Doctors where, they're being extracted, and they're meeting each other. Nor you don't have any of that now. It's just a quick, oh, flash by generation. Look, they're meeting each other. You have no explanation of what an effect that can have on the universe.
Look, I sometimes wonder about the definition of campness, because it's like the word woke, it can be overused. But there was an element where I find RTD seems to be making Doctor Who into this kind of, it's not event TV, like you said, it's about moment TV, that he thinks Doctor Who fans will just love yesterday's episode for the end. That Kate O'Mara, it was kind of the high camp with Time and Arani to a degree, wasn't it? It was very Dallas. But basically, change my idea, not a moment too soon. You've got from Colin Baker, then it's the man I want, and all the rest, all that. But sorry, last night, again, it's the end of the episode that I think saves him, because that's what the fans are talking about, for good or bad. But then he can't even land that, because why did the Rani, who we know from the mark of the Rani, and it was established that she didn't like all that male ego crap between the Master and the Doctor. She was just a scientist. She was bored by their wars. And last night she said, I am the definitive article, the definitive Rani. In other words, she was aping the William Hartnell, the first Doctor. And then you're going, oh, hold on a minute here. You're not the definitive article, by the way. That's Kate O'Mara. Why put that line in?
I mean, again, mate, that from that line, that's disrespectful to Kate O'Mara, because she made the Rani what it was, as what it is as a character. But I think with all of this nonsense, for me, this is where I think it's lazy writing. You know, if you're going to do the Rani, do the Rani, but actually have them doing some interesting stuff in stories as you build up to the big reveal. You know, actually make it clear earlier that it's the Rani. You know, and then you suddenly start figuring out more of their schemes. From everything everybody's told me about this season, she just pops up at the end of each episode with a little bit of a Mary Poppins moment and looks
Yeah,
at the breaks the fourth wall, and then clears off again. You know, the Rani, as we know from watching classic Doctor Who, the Rani is an unethical scientist that was expelled from Gallifrey because of it. You know, and she doesn't care about taking over the universe. She had slaves, as we've seen in it, but
yeah.
she was all about the next experiment. That's what she was focused on. And you know, from what people have told me already, that this Mrs. Flood character, there is no there is nothing in it whatsoever that basically says that she's a scientist. Nothing. But he will do a throwaway line in the finale to say she's a scientist. But you know, Kate O'Mara, when she was the Rani, you saw her being a scientist in those stories. You saw what she was doing. But this is just another example of RTD has gone, I'm going to bring back the Rani. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to call that person the Rani, but I'm going to write my own version of a character, but just slap that title on
Well,
it.
apparently, I mean, and this does happen with most actors nowadays who play Doctor Who. They, you know, like Capaldi, can I have the Mondasian
Yeah.
Cybermen? Okay. Um, Obviously, we know Shooty's asked for the Daleks, and they may come in the finale, God help
Oh,
us. But the
heaven
other
forbid.
thing is,
Yeah.
Shooty did say he wanted the Rani. Now, the thing is, if you watched last night's episode and everyone's going on about the ratings and that, you've got to remember the casual viewer, if they had an experience of last night, will be going, am I into all this high camp Doctor Who? Who is that old woman who's in the TARDIS? I didn't get that bit because it wasn't explained. She
Yeah.
did say grandfather at one point, but that would confuse a lot of casual viewers. And then you saw two women, well, one woman, come out of the cryogenic chamber. It had already gone a little bit camp, and she said, "Oh, you can't freeze a female time lady's brain; it has a bad effect." And she suddenly started doing the hocus pocus stuff, and then suddenly split into two. Can you imagine being a casual viewer going, I
Well,
kind of think I know that the Doctor sometimes regenerates, so it's normally when he's dying. As Paul Holgate said, this seemed to be she, she was thawing badly, so basically she regenerates into a right bitch.
yeah. Yeah. I just think, you know, we're well beyond jumping the shark with this era of, well, I say Doctor Who because it's not Doctor Who, it's a bastardization of Doctor Who, but it's you know, you've now got, you know, if you're a general viewer and you've stuck along with it and you're thinking, oh, I'll give it a go, you've now got, what is it, one episode left now, right? You've just seen supposedly the bad the villains for season 3 for the final episode announced. Who gives a stuff? You know, you're
Well,
like, well, what? Why do I care?
shall I excite you even more? Because you're actually diminishing the series. There's two left.
That was two, is there?
There's two
Oh,
left.
God forbid.
And everybody at first saw this photograph and said, "Oh, the unholy." You see, he's going to get bums on seats here. Look, the unholy trinity is what the Doctor's against in the finale too.
Yeah,
And so you see three people, and then RTD is then spoiled that again. He can't shut his face, so he suddenly says, "That's not the unholy trinity. The Rani counts as one."
oh
So you're
gosh.
going, all right, so there's still a surprise coming. So it could be Omega, it could be Missy, because Michelle Gomez was seen at the launch. Um,
I think, look, mate. If right, okay, if it turns out that it's Missy that's coming back because she's seen at the premiere, who is an iteration of the Master, they worked together in the Mark of the Rani. But the Rani didn't want to work with the Master because
no,
but he was effectively holding her experiment hostage, so she had no choice at that point. the for them to suddenly do a team up would just make me laugh. But I'm the same as you. I can see an Omega return because, again, he did it with Sutek last year. He's going to have, Omega, sitting on a chaise lounge on top of the TARDIS in the final story. That's going to happen at some point, and then the payoff is going to be ridiculous and wrapped up within about five to 10 minutes. With a lot of tears. It's just nonsense. It really is.
Well, Rachel, who's warming up for tonight and no doubt streaming, no, RTD has said this person is 160 years in the future. I know, but Rachel, the timey-wimey thing, RTD can just stick somebody anywhere. Where's Conrad Clark stuck now? Remember, because Mrs. Flood has locked him away and released him, but she can have an eye on him. The Master could be a golden tooth and still in a place just awaiting the awakening. Because remember, is he going to give us payoff for that red fingernail picking up the golden tooth? I don't want him to, but the Rani seems to be wearing an awful lot of red. Is she the red fingernailed person who picks up the Master's golden tooth? There's one possibility to help with the Holy Trinity. That doesn't mean you see the Master. You might see Missy. I don't know if this 160 years in the future, Rachel, helps us any further or not. I think it's just a fact. I just don't know why RTD can't allow us to wait.
It's going to be Eric Roberts, Master, in his full flamboyant gear, going, "I always dress for the occasion," going down the stairs.
I know. So it's like, I'm just thinking, people. And by the way, nobody died last night again. And you had one of the most amazing images and visuals where everybody left. It was 100,000 arena, and 100,000 people were kind of sucked into space slowly and silently. Brilliant. This is dark Doctor Who, but it lasted seconds. They added a bit of emotion, if they could, by Belinda seeing this, and you got a close up, and then you saw, stuff moving past her. But then in a minute, in seconds later, you get the Doctor seeing Susan, even though his brain's freezing. And then, by the way, every other time the Doctor is close to death, he sees Adric. He doesn't see Susan.
Yeah.
I mean, Adric is higher up in his estimation than Susan, because he never saw Susan when Tom Baker regenerated, but he saw Adric.
Yeah. I with the Susan thing, I think anyone that still cares, I think you're going to be sadly disappointed, because my thoughts on it are that it's not going to be a Susan. It is not going to be the Susan. I think it's going to be something like a TARDIS hologram, or it's going to be some sort of red herring that he'll throw in where she'll just be a little gimmick to try and tease people back, and then she'll be gone again. And I think that if that does happen, then shame on them, because that's not on after all these years. But again, as you said, Brendan, nobody cares. If you're a general viewer, who is Susan? Remember when the Master came back in Utopia? They did this thing, remember when they did Confidential, and they did a whole episode on the Master, explaining to people, and people were watching Confidential at the time, explaining who the Master was, all the backstory of the Master. They did all of that. But at least back then with Utopia in the episode as well, even if you didn't know who he was, they had the Delgado and the Ainley voices as he was looking at the fob watch. They just don't seem to do it with this now. It's just like, oh, it's the Rani, read about it next week in, Radio Times or.
But this is the fear of what's going on with Doctor Who at the moment, that he and you've said the word lazy. He is not coming up with new material.
No.
And if you go back to season 1, I mean, somebody scared me. Go back to 2005. The end of the season, it was the Daleks. End of season 2, it was the Cybermen, Time Lords, villainous Time Lords. Go all the way to the Master. Go all the way through. Sutek was the latest one. Yeah. When does he actually bloody well do his own thing and actually just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken? Why doesn't he just go forward? And instead, it's a lazy pension building portfolio of nonsense. But a lot of Doctor Who fans who like a bit of logic and a bit of consistency are saying, But the Doctor wouldn't do that, and the Rani wouldn't do that, and
Yeah,
Sutik wouldn't look like that. And why have you done that? And he's capturing,
yeah,
changing, vandalizing our whole canon and Blu-ray collections just because he cannot be bothered to come up with some new material.
absolutely. Again, that was always the argument with between about him and Moffat and who was the better showrunner. Because for me, at least Moffat for finales, he tried something original. Whereas you're right, RTD, although and this is a thing, last year he said, oh, we're not going to be tied to classic Who or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but yet he brings Sutek back. He's brought the Rani back. He's going to bring someone else back for the finale. It's all mining the history of the show because, as you were saying a few minutes ago or alluding to, he's out of ideas. He doesn't know what to do, so he's riffing off of previous successes.
And, while you'll see some streamers who suddenly say, well, there you go, the ratings have gone up, RTD's the messiah of Doctor Who. Look at that. So you've got there in yellow 2.57. The last time we got as high as that, it beats Empire of Death, it beats Legend of Ruby Sunday, it beats Rogue, it beats Dot and Bubble, it beats Boom, it beats Devil's Cord, it nearly matches Space Babies. We're back on the money. You lot are trolls. You lot shut up and go and find another program. Go and touch grass. You can imagine the hysteria by that side. When actually, if you're just sensible, you go, hold on a minute. Look at the full context here. Statistics don't lie. And I've got this context so that people can see that I am being fair.
Yep.
Yes, it has gone up by 980,000 since last week. Yes, I give it credit. I put it in green. It is rare. For season one, only had 2 upticks. We've already had 3. But to be honest, he's got his ducks in a row a bit better. The FA Cup final and the Eurovision, he's got the bounce. And that 980,000 does not bear any relation to anything that happened before. And so, is it just a one-off? Is it just a blip? Is it a statistical aberration? That is the question that in Ollie, the people who just like to go and stream for a minute and say, look, I've noticed something, really. And you think, yeah, but have you applied your brain cells yet? Have you really calmly reflected and analyzed? Because the bigger picture is always the key.
Yeah.
And that 980,000 stands out an absolute mile. So is it a one-off?
I think it's a one-off, and I think looking at the data there, the other thing I would say is that as you said, 2 episodes left. See, I got that right. I've remembered. I've remembered. The 2 episodes left, they're going to fall below last year, so they'll fall below Empire of Death, in my opinion. So again, when you're talking about people, the higher ups, and they're talking about viewing figures, they will look at the data, and I think I'll be able, hopefully, to confirm this, in my opinion, when we get to the final episode data. It's effectively going to be lower in viewing figures than it was for the finale last year. Now, if you're an exec, you'll basically be looking at that and going, sorry, how much money again? We've talked about it over how many weeks now, mate? How much money are we putting into this show? What are we getting for a return on it?
And
Very little.
And as Mark Jones says here, because he has said so much that actually you spot differences. So when I talked yesterday about the Mirror article saying, in 2027 there'll be a new series, there wasn't much evidence in that article. And actually everything just about in the article I'd said and other people had said, and I don't mean we're not soothsayers, it's just it was obvious, it was in front of us. He'd said in the Imagine documentary that he was already writing season 3. So that there was no news there. Just because he's writing episodes doesn't mean he's been given the job. Now, Mark Jones says here, didn't RTD say at the beginning of his second stint that it was going to be a brand new show? Yes, he did, for a new audience, because he said change. Doctor Who's always about change. We're going to change again, and I don't want the actors seeing the old classics and blah, blah, blah. All he's done is rehash classic Who. Basically, he's done what Chibnall did. Chibnall tried to go forward, and then suddenly, as soon as we all kind of laughed at the frog on the chair, he suddenly went backwards.
Yep, absolutely right. I mean, you know, it is at that point, you know, in the following seasons where he was suddenly like, oh, okay, I've got to start mining some of the monsters that have been successful previously. So you had the Daleks come back, you had the Weeping Angels. You know, it was a massive course correction on what Chibnall was doing, and you know, I think if season 1 and 2 hadn't been filmed together, you would have had a massive course correction for season 2. I think for Doctor Who, I think this season 2 would have played out very very differently. I think they're never going to admit it, but with the exception of RTD and his close cabal of people, there'll be people higher ups that are basically, you know, they would say, no, if we could have done something about this, we would have done something about this. You know, um, it's
What was interesting, John, is that Mirror article that certain people. I always say be calm to everybody. You know, it's just that some streamers and Doctor Who fans are determined to prove a point.
yeah,
I've moved to a cynical position, but cynical just means also you're doing critical thinking. I am not an advocate for ending the show, and I'm not an advocate for saying this is the most amazing thing since sliced bread. It's it's all over the shop, really. And so are the stats. And what was interesting about the Mirror article is one of the things it stated was that the BBC are happy with the consolidated figures for the season of an average of 4 million. And I thought, oh, hold on a minute here. Now, are the BBC happy with that? So basically, if I go back to that figure, I've just been looking, you know, the consolidated, well, we haven't hit 4 million since what, 73 yards. Joy to
yeah,
the World is a Christmas one. So they're averaging up. Everything being said is always averaging up, you know,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
papering over cracks, being unwilling to deal with the truth. You know, I and you with your Sci-Fi Chronicles 79, we have to deal with the truth. If we make a show and 10 people watch, it will say 10.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we can't round it off to 50.
No,
Um, but the way they're talking, the
I
great,
told you to not tell everyone about those 10 views I had, mate. All right.
yeah, all your family, no, no. But the truth is, it's like, yeah, you're rounding up. So apparently, the BBC are happy with an average of 4 million after a month of watching time.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And you know, I I heard a bit of your when I was out gardening. I heard some of your stuff yesterday, and you know, you were talking and made a very very clear point on the fact is, you know, you talked about other series that are on at the moment that they've already been commissioned for new series.
Yeah.
If this was as successful as they were talking about, the BBC would have commissioned it already.
Yes.
You know, that would have happened. You know, there wouldn't have been all this back and forth with the BBC press team. No decision has been made. A decision will be made after season 2 has aired. That's not how professional executives work. Professional executives, they think, right, if we've got a good thing going here, we're going to announce the recommissioning of it straight away
Yeah.
because we want to get moving on getting the production going, getting the actors booked up and locked in for the upcoming production set. They want to make sure the budget is set for how much it's going to cost. They want to do all of that, so they move very very quickly. So for me, looking at someone is just looking at the evidence that has been presented to me so far, it doesn't look like it is actually going to get commissioned after this season 2 has aired.
No, I mean, and this is what I mean. You just think, okay, streamers out there, you're trying to say one thing proves this, one proves this. Look at the articles, apply English reading. Look between the lines. Where's the primary source? Where's the actual quote? And where's the evidence? I looked at that last night in our show, and there isn't much. There was actually almost a bit more in the Sun article that said it was more tantamount to being axed. But basically, I think they were saying it was going to be a long pause until the BBC decides what to do. But the big fact that is missing, which it would have been so easy to do, and you're quite right, like I said, Michael McIntyre, Gladiators, there's so many programs that have been announced very quickly as successes and they've recommissioned. Doctor Who seems to be on the naughty step, and I'm sorry, but the BBC easily would just have to say it will be coming back. It's just we don't know quite when, with a new actor, maybe. I understand, and I said it in the show yesterday. They may want to just get the new actor in place to announce it, or a new showrunner, because the rumors are. Um, if it would have been so easy, John, as you're saying, if RTD has written the next two series already and he's got all these completed scripts, as he said in Doctor Who magazine, then don't the BBC just have to say it's going to definitely be on because we've got everything in place? They just have to say it.
Yeah, exactly right. And the fact that they're not is very, very telling to me. You know, it's, again, it's not just Disney, but you've got to think about how much outlay the BBC have put into this production as well. So when you hear people talking about allegedly, what is it, 100 million that Disney put in, that's Disney what they've put in. So how much did the BBC put in to produce this Doctor Who series?
Yeah.
So again, when you're getting these returns, and it was pitched by RTD, and he said it, he's on record as saying it. We were going to be bigger than ever. It was going to be the Hooniverse, and we were going to take on the world and Marvel and Lucasfilm and DC. We were going to be up there, and Star Trek. It hasn't done that, and it's now at a point now. And I said to you before when we were talking, mate, I've got friends in the US, and I don't even ask them about whether they watch Doctor Who anymore, because if we're getting the viewing figures that are so low here in the UK, it's not going to track anywhere in the United States. And in fact, some of them just volunteer information to me, and they said, "No, we just don't watch it anymore." And I've heard this from so many people
Yeah.
because where they thought it was uniquely British, they just think it's embarrassing now.
Well, it must be embarrassing to a degree because look at that. Doctor Who ends with 2.82 million. That's the borrowed extras at the very end of the program. And then literally 15 minutes later, the BBC's hitting 6.45. I've got similar figures for Joy to the World when Wallace and Gromit just was stratospheric 15 minutes later. And we've got news coming in. It's really big news for the Sensoria channel. Let me just check.
Oh.
Well, they've hardly slept, but thanks to Eye of Horus, he wants to give them a treat. Thank you very much, very generous of you. He's a £5 towards the Who Pets Holly Bobs in Gran Canaria. If they're bumping to RTD, run, Jamie, run. Oh, God, it depends if they want to go to one of those adults-only hotels.
And
but
EOH editorial, I just answer it, seeing he's put one there. He asked me a question about, what, I'm a Stargate fan, and what would I say about, the spin-offs, how they could apply it to Doctor Who? Well, I think the difference with Stargate was they made a show where the writing was very, very on point. The actors were great, and they made it character pieces each week, which made it a success. And I think what happened from there is they then had spin-off series when they knew that they had an absolute success, because you had Stargate SG-1 that had a spin-off series probably about 7 years after Stargate SG-1 had been on. What Doctor Who production team have done with the war between the land and the sea is they ran before they could walk. And they basically said, "Oh, our Doctor Who's going to be a massive success. We're going to be a global success. We're going to do a spin-off and commission it straight away." So now they're in a problem where they've got a spin-off coming, and not many people are interested in the actual Prime show. That creates a problem.
And the other problem is, and I'm wobbling. I never thought I'd get to this point, but I'm really wobbling because I'm struggling with the actual main character of the Doctor. Last night, you'll have heard he was sadistic. He tortured a lad who you could call him a freedom fighter or a terrorist, that old chestnut, who'd had a bad childhood again. And he tortured him for that minute, a minute of TV. He tortured him, and it was very like the Phantom Menace. It really was with Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker. But you see, when Star Wars did it, it was quite clear that Luke Skywalker, you were supposed to be the one who felt sorry for, and how ugly and horrible was this bullying by the Phantom Menace, so to speak.
Yeah.
That was clear in Star
Emperor,
Wars. We have clear morals in sci-fi, but it's blurred because the Doctor was very happily and cowardly, by the way, because it was a hologram Mavity glove. Don't go there. He was a hologram, so Kid didn't know where the Doctor was. So basically, he could keep tasering him. And he said, "You were going to kill 3 trillion people. So what about 3 trillion tasers?" Now, this was going to go on. Susan in his head kept saying, "Stop." Belinda appeared and said, and he stopped then. But basically, he either went very Time Lord victorious, or he went a bit Colin Baker at the very beginning of Trindilemma, which we know was a mistake. Or I'm thinking, I don't recognize this Doctor.
It's not the Doctor at all. I mean, what Russell T Davies has done is he's basically made the Doctor a human being. You know, effectively, if you watch it, you know, and you jump into Doctor Who now and you watch any of Ncuti Gatwa's performance, it's effectively like he's just stolen the TARDIS as a human and he's traveling around in it, you know, because like I said to you, I watched season 1, but there were no characteristics of the Doctor in season 1 for me, in my opinion. And I just, from what you're telling me there, I mean, I funnily enough, I did see people on last night and they were saying, oh, you know, RTD's great plan. He's going to do the Vale Yard with Ncuti and all of that. And I was like, well, I don't actually think he is. I don't think he's intelligent now to write that kind of story. And he's going to focus on the big bad. You know, the only other thing that I thought about, you know, this with that element, I cannot see Ncuti's Doctor, him portraying Ncuti's Doctor as an evil version. I just can't. It goes against what he's trying to pitch as his message to the audience.
There's so much here. Let me just kind of bring in. There's a few different threads. You've mentioned the Valiad, for example, and so does Snake here. I think you're forgetting the Valiad appears between the 12th and the final reincarnation. But since this new version has infinite amounts of regeneration, it could be any time. Great. We fans understand that, Snake. The snag is the casual viewer after the FA Cup final will not be going, oh, this is the Valiad Doctor. This is just the fans getting excited by something that happened 40 years ago and actually has never been ploughed into since. So you could actually say, let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah.
Harrington says, he teased and tortured him. That's not the Doctor. Obviously, Michael Hallett says, is this the Valiad in action? Paul Richards, the Doctor wouldn't normally take pleasure in inflicting pain. Gatwa doesn't have the acting chops to be formidable. JWC reviews. Did you see your reaction up on the screen?
Can I just quote a certain Doctor from, you know, from the 50th? Never cruel or cowardly. You know, that's the essence of the Doctor. You know, and that is what, again, this is what I said to you earlier in the show about the Rani. He's using the name the Rani, but the character is not going to be the Rani because he's basically written on his script. He's basically written, this is the character I want to be in the finale. And then he's gone, do you know what? I'll make that character the Rani. He's doing the same with the Doctor. He's basically going, right, these are the characteristics I want in this show from my leading man. But it's not the Doctor, but we'll call it the Doctor, you know, and that's what he's doing.
But the other thing I want to say, and I'm going to bring it in with JWC reviews, and I think this is extremely problematic. This is how I see it. So first of all, JWC, I perceived it as the Doctor's actions symbolizing the rage felt by the trans community against their oppressors. I thought, my notes last night, JWC and John, were this. My notes were, this seems to be a fantasy torture by a progressive of the other side. I didn't link it completely to trans. I could see. Now, that doesn't make them better. How is this RTD? This is anger out of control. Time Lord Victorious was ugly. The Sixth Doctor attacking Perry was a misstep. Why are we deciding to show the Doctor? Remember, a family drama. He says he wants 6-year-olds watching. I'm sorry, as an ex-head of year, no kid can come in my office and saying, I was hitting him for a minute because, he's on the wrong side of the political debate.
Yeah.
No. There's no excuse at all for cruelty. End of. You might think you're on the right side. Sorry, you're not the arbiter. Back off. The Doctor being cruel, how is that hero? Do you know what? We talk about the first Doctor in An Earthly Child picking up a rock. That looks like child's play now when he tortured somebody for a minute.
And again, that example is perfect because I remember last year all the nonsense that was coming out, and I had it in the Jodie Whittaker era. I had these people constantly coming out with comments, and Shooty said it, when he started, and it was like, the Doctor is love. Shooty said that the Doctor is love. The Doctor was never love, and An Earthly Child confirms that. He was going to murder somebody because that person was slowing them down to get back to the TARDIS and be safe. But now the Doctor is love has completely changed by them to be the Doctor can torture anyone he wants because he's got god tier status and he has the moral authority to do whatever he feels he can. So
Yeah.
It also devalues what you were saying about that the one where he's had a go at the podcaster at the end of the episode, with his rage. How can you morally criticize him when you're torturing people?
But this is what I mean. And the Doctor did. And JWC reviews, I got it. And in fact, in my Who Night last night, I did say it was a metaphor for the trans debate. In fact, you can see it there, 23 minutes 20. I've actually written it down on my slide. Can't sing the trans message. There was a moment, John, in the Eurovision Song Contest, the Interstellar Song Contest, when the trans character the metaphorical trans character who's chopped her horns off to be accepted, because everybody hates the Hellions. Everybody hates them. So to be accepted, she's self-harmed, self-mutilated her body, right? So I can see where we're going with this. She sings her song, and all these lovely people, all the Be Kind mob, nobody claps. So she sings a song. It sounds like a song. She finishes. Silence. And I know Hollywood love this dramatic crap, but basically total silence. And one of the gay characters out of the couple, he starts to clap. And because he starts to clap, 100,000 people start to clap. In other words, they're all followers. Nobody wanted to make the first move. As soon as I say be kind, everybody does. As soon as I kneel before a kick off a football match, everybody does. It's followers, no conviction, no integrity. Yep. So JWC reviews, I totally get what you're saying and I agree with you. But where was the clever message? Nobody, including the Doctor and Belinda, clapped. It was the gay man who clapped first, and nobody else thought she deserved any cheer. In other words, nobody has a heart, actually, on that side of the politics. I thought it was a terrible message.
But doesn't it go against their actual their message about trans, about the fact that they want these procedures? So the episode you're saying is about the fact that they did this to be accepted. Whereas that goes against what their real life mission statement essentially.
You felt sorry for
understand
Cora. I felt sorry for, because it was a little moment when she said, she's had to hide all her life and all the rest of it. And I can't be bad about that. I got that, but but when she sang the song of herself at the end, and it was the spirit of the song contest, as Rowland said.
Did she win?
No, they didn't do any winners or losers, but I suppose she morally won.
Yeah.
JWC, I actually thought Cara was going to sing I Am What I Am for her son. Instead, she sang some unintelligible dirge. I Will Survive might have been a better choice if they could afford it. I think they paid enough for Bucks Fizz to blood and do that. That's the level of it. But
Do you
I
know what?
just
I
think,
joked with you a couple of weeks ago, and I said they'll have Shooty with the Bucks Fizz thing where they're ripping his skirt off. You know,
yeah,
they'll
yeah,
have that. But I didn't. I was joking when I said that. So for them to actually have Bucks Fizz in it, you know, or that playing, you know, I've got to be careful what I say going forward because I'm clearly creating things into reality at the
yeah.
moment.
And by the way, everybody, the sadistic doctor, please go to my point here at 40 minutes. How is this the doctor? And how is this acceptable as a moral case? At 40 minutes, Bell and the doctor hug, and he says kind of sorry to Bell for being a nasty doctor, because he says the death of the potential death of 3 trillion people was it triggered him so much that's why he tortured a kid. And I'm going, there is no excuse. And how come? And John, you've tiptoed on it. Conrad Clark had a bad childhood, and his mother hit him.
Yeah,
But the doctor was saying, "I'm dying to see you die when you're 49." And
yeah.
by the way, in this episode, earlier on, the doctor says, "You will freeze. I've got a cold in my heart, but I will haunt you, and I will find you." And this doctor, yes, I think there is a character arc going on, and it may be the Valiad. Who cares? It may be he. I hopefully he. It's a regeneration of suicide, because maybe in the end, what he does is he actually says, "I need to kill myself because I'm a bad doctor." I wonder if there's something going on
Well,
here, because he is bad.
well, two things really. The first one I would say about what you said there, the death of 3 trillion people was the doctor's excuse. If you want to have an example from New Who, you go back to Parting of the Ways, where he says to the Emperor of the Daleks, the Dalek Emperor, he basically says, you know, are you a the Emperor says, are you a coward or killer? And he says, coward any day.
Yeah.
And he's not prepared to wipe out humanity to
Yes.
defeat the Daleks. So they've even just reversed that, you know, and that was from 2005. So that is perfectly encapsulates the Doctor. You know, he doesn't want to be a killer on a high level. He's been forced to it throughout the history in New Who because of the what has happened in the Time War. The other thing I was going to say about Conrad and the Doctor. I think you're right that they could be going down that route potentially, you know, and at least if that's the case, there is an arc to it where it's self regeneration because of what he's doing. Now there was always the talk, and you know, the rumor at the time that the Seventh Doctor, the plan was always that he was going to regenerate because he was going mad because of all his schemes in his head were driving him insane. So he was going to force a regeneration.
Mm.
That was never confirmed. So I could see RTD riffing off of that, but then on the other side of it, I cannot see RTD turning what I call his diversity doctor into the villain. I
No.
cannot see it. I just can't see it.
And may I say, and of course, thank you, IFRS. Do I have the right? Genesis, hello, hello, yes. Spoilt slightly by remembrance when he fired the genocide hand of Omega. um, but it wasn't a story that actually completed last night. It's always, we need to tune in next week. Now I know that's not episodic the way he's doing it. It's just kind of, I've bolted on the Rani at the end, and so you'll see the fulmination of that next week. But the story in itself doesn't grab. I
Mm.
always compare it to Utopia. Derek Jacobi's master appears at the end. Fantastic reveal.
Yeah.
The Rani appeared last night. Underwhelming, I felt. I did. I'd seen the leaks like everybody. I'd heard the rumors. You were almost expecting it. And when I saw the bi-generation, I went, oh my, well, that leak's true as well. And I actually was just very flat and underwhelmed.
Do you know what?
But remember,
Yeah.
Utopia was a bit of a flat story. It was only saved by the reveal.
It was. And do you know why Utopia works so well? Is because Derek Jacobi's performance and the way it's written is you've got this lovable, doddery old man throughout that episode that everybody in that story adores. And then when he turns, you know, and you
Yeah.
see his eyes looking directly at the camera, you're you're then gripped by it before you even have the announcement that he's the master, because of how suddenly he's flipped from this doddery, lovely, adorable old man into this sinister character. And it's just superb. You don't have any of that with Mrs. Flood, from what I've been told. You have her pop up at the end of every episode, and there's none of that. There's no investment in the character from the audience, because they're like, oh, okay. And again, this is me thinking for the audience here, but they're probably going, oh, Mrs. Flood's popped up again. Oh, that, oh, what's she got to do this week, for 5 minutes ago? They're waiting for it, but they've got no emotional attachment to that character.
No, it just didn't land for me. So I found the whole thing disappointing, and yet I was with it for quite a long way. But the thing is, you need to kind of have some sort of landing, and this tractor beam nonsense and everything. So just as a wrap up, everybody, there's the 5-minute breakdowns. Ignore the Eurovision figure at the end. That's actually the FA Cup final lead-in. Doctor Who received 3.42 million, but seemed to lose 900,000 very quickly. We managed to average around a 23% audience share, and it normally gets 13%. So basically, Britain's Got Talent not being on, FA Cup final at the start, and Eurovision afterwards has given Doctor Who an extra 10% audience share boost. Is that a statistical aberration? Next week will tell us. But look, Doctor Who ends. It was a Eurovision extravaganza on Doctor Who, and yet we still couldn't tap into the potential, and the potential seemed to be around 6.5 million Europhiles who were dying to get some Europop, and Doctor Who didn't grab those people. So basically, in the end, you might like that figure. RTD will be banking himself on it and making sure the pension's ready, but I'm not too sure that's really going to be the deal. John,
No.
obviously, what you're up to on Sci-Fi Chronicles 79?
Thanks, mate. So tonight at 8:30 UK and 12:30 midday Pacific Standard Time in the US, we're doing the Stargate Watch SG1 live watch along. So basically, you can come into the free Discord thread with us where we're airing the episode. You can watch it along with us, and then you can comment as we go along in the YouTube chat. So that's been great fun, and people seem to be enjoying it. So we'll carry that on tonight. And other than that, I've got some movie reviews and Doctor Who reviews to finish and get them out. So like you, I'm going to be in the editing suite this week.
Yes, I'm going to have a break in a minute, and then tonight, 5:45, I've got the team. I've got the grades have come in, their scores have come in, and yet again, there's no agreement. We don't agree. So this is going to be interesting.
Going to be carnage, isn't it? Going to be carnage.
There's some high marks from one person, and there's some very low marks from others. It's very interesting. So join us tonight at 5:45 if you can. Please like and subscribe. Please do the same for John's channel, Sci-Fi Chronicles 79.
Thanks,
and let's see what happens next. So thanks a lot, John, and thanks to the thread.
Mate.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care all. See ya.